became somewhat desensitized to this. Of course they did. Because that's the way human beings are. If we hear something long enough, if we're exposed to something long enough, we begin to accept it because that's just easy. It was mentally difficult to oppose something all the time. Yet, we will never ban that sort of music. And this is when the idols and the sacred cows of Western liberal democracy come out shouting, no, we can't ban music, that's against freedom. But the ideals that it's very easy to be free when it's not your son or your daughter whose blood has been shed on the streets of London, Birmingham or Manchester. It's very easy to have ideals at that point. Which is why those very people should not be making those ideals. Going back to the same argument before, that we all have our biases, we all have our unique experiences. So to summarize, the purpose of your life is essentially this: to know your Creator, to follow and accept what that Creator has stipulated for you, because that way you will harmonize the purpose of your hearts, minds, bodies and souls. And ultimately, if you follow that, you will then understand what true justice is. You will understand what are the things that will allow a society, a civilization to flourish. And this is not a theoretical example I've given. There have been societies which have lasted for hundreds of years based on these principles. And this is essentially what Islam is. Because Islam means to submit to the Creator in accepting the way things are, the realities that are present in this life and in the next. That's essentially what it is. People call it religion, people call it a number of different things, but that's what it is, coming to the realization that we have been made and created for a purpose. And that it is that Creator, God, who ultimately determines what your purpose is, and has given you a pattern of behavior which defines to you what civilization is, and defines to you and gives you your humanity. And this, as I said, this was not a pipe dream. The Islamic civilization, when it implemented this way, this worldview, was able to deal with those people who didn't even agree with it. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the most sacred shrine in Christendom, where it is said, where the Christians believe that Jesus was crucified, the keys to it are opened every day by a Muslim. By a Muslim who was put there by Salahuddin Ayyubi, the one who fought off the Crusades and brought Jerusalem back to a very thriving, multi-religious center again. Because in Islam, it makes sense that, isn't it amazing that the Creator, even the people who reject Him, He still allows them a system by which to live. And this is why in Islam, really, I mean, I don't know what the real definition of multiculturalism is, but what it allowed was different people were allowed their own different judiciary. The Christians had their judiciary, the Jews had their judiciary, they had a certain amount of autonomy in many areas of their life. Very than we have today. It's very simplistic to just lump people together and say, you're British, mate, you know, let's all be British together and eat fish and chips and watch football, or whatever Britishness is. They can't really define it. So they have to look to all these really shallow kind of things to bond people on. No. You can be whatever you want to be, but as long as we've got terms of engagement, that wherever that you interact with your community, you have your own community, but if you need to interact with society, there's also terms of engagement there. That's why Amnon Cohen, who is a Zionist writer, and I make that differentiation from a Jewish writer, because Zionism is a separate ideology to Judaism completely. It's a modern day political secular philosophy. Okay? the idea of that the Jews must have their homeland, whereas Orthodox Judaism, by consensus of all Jewish scholars of the past, is that they believe that the diaspora, that the Jewish diaspora from the Holy Land is part of God's plan and is something that's not going to be able to be revoked until the Messiah comes. But Judaism was Zionism, was a way of getting people back and forcing this to happen. But anyway, Amnon Cohen wrote that when it came to the Ottoman record, because the Ottomans ruled over Palestine and including Jerusalem, up until until Allenby marched in with his forces. He noted that the Jews preferred to go to the Muslim Qadi, the Muslim judge ruling by Sharia, more than they did go to their rabbis. This is a Jewish historian noting this. Because rabbinical Judaism is kind of tough in many ways. Whereas in Islam, the Sharia, or Islamic law, or divine sacred law, is about mercy. It's about overlooking. It's about giving people the benefit of the doubt. Ignorance is an excuse. So don't be fooled by these red herrings which are thrown about people's hands being chopped off and heads being chopped off and all these kind of things. Because even though they are there, the burden of proof is absolutely shocking, to the point that you could not imagine that somebody could actually prove this. For example, the punishment for adultery can only be established when 4 witnesses see the act taking place between a married person, the person who has to be married. That's what adultery is. Sex outside of marriage, even though the person is married. And excuse me for being so explicit, but this is how particular it is. They have got to see the pen in the ink, which is pretty unlikely in modern day houses. We don't live in huts and tents anymore, by and large. So it's not going to happen. And this is what's not being told to you. Nobody's telling anybody as to the burden of proof required. It's true, it's very difficult. And that's why if you look at the state records, there's numbers into maybe the tens or maybe 100 maximum in maybe 1500 years. And usually it was because they confessed themselves. They wanted to be pure before God. It was their choice, actually, if you think about it. The court did not enforce that. So, this is just one example, but that point is very important here. We have to look at the mercy and the justice. We have to look at the fact that we as Muslims have got to take our share of the responsibility for the lack of knowledge of Islam. We have to do this. Because we don't really study Islam like it should be. We don't, and therefore we cannot expect non-Muslims to appreciate or understand Islam. We also, due to colonial baggage from our parents or grandparents, have also not been able to reach out effectively to people in this country. And that we also have to take responsibility for. This is not the way our Prophet actually taught us. Because ultimately, brothers, sisters and friends, the prophets are sent, and messengers were sent to enact the laws of God, to show, one, that it is possible for human beings to reach this level of behavior and standard, and secondly, for them to be teachers for the rest of mankind, and to be examples and role models, because we all need tangible role models to achieve things in any aspect of success. And ultimately, this is what we as Muslims need to be doing. We need to be showing the exemplary character, the aspect of forgiveness as I talked about. Unfortunately, we may have a victim mentality nowadays because of all the things that are happening in the Middle East and the wider world. We Muslims, this is not what our Prophet taught us, to be victim mentality, to have this victim mentality and to become a politically ethnic group. No. The role of a person who accepts the fundamental truths that I have talked about today, their job is to be a leader for mankind, to provide stewardship for mankind. Because God says in the scripture, the Quran, which discusses this, mentioned, it says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. That you are the best nation ever raised for mankind. And this You enjoy the good, you forbid the evil, and you believe in God. And now, this is not a chosen people mentality. Okay, I want to make that clear. Because anybody can be part of this. Anybody can be part of it. And not just that, but it doesn't mean that we as Muslims, once you become Muslims, that's it. It's a salvation mentality. That's it. We're on the ark now, we can do what we like. No. It's a responsibility that we will also be accounted for on the Day of Judgment. So we are all in the same boat. And we all have to understand that. And we all have to be sincere with one another. And if you choose not to accept this, then again, that's your choice. Because as God says in the Quran as well, La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion in matters of what ideology you choose. We're just here to present, we're just here to discuss, and inshallah I hope we can take the opportunity in the question and answer session to discuss this, and also afterwards if you want to discuss with me personally, and there's something you didn't want to say publicly or whatever, then I will afford you that opportunity. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Brother Saleem. So I would like to open the floor to question and answer session. So brothers and sisters, anyone with questions?